When you're a kid, video games are mysterious. Literally anything can happen, and some of our earliest gaming memories are all about the weird, strange, scary moments that infected our brains for life and possibly traumatized us. Yes, not actually traumatized in the serious sense, we're only talking video games here, but there was some weird stuff that definitely scarred us as kids. We scoured the internet for 20 varied examples, so let's get started off with number 20. Let's get started with a very specific one of the strangest jump scares in video game history. And this is really genuinely scary. Most of the entries on this list are just pure childhood fear, silly stuff, the sort of things that won't actually scare you as an adult. Most of our gaming traumas come from moments that are tame today, but one weird official Scooby-Doo Flash game took that kid's horror mandate to the extreme. With a name like Scooby-Doo Escape from the Coulsonian, which I guess is like a cooler version of the Smithsonian Museum, you wouldn't really expect big scares. This tiny little Flash game was made to promote the then new Scooby-Doo movie sequel in 2004. It's a real, officially licensed Scooby-Doo Flash game. I want you all to remember that when you see the scary thing. It's a really basic Flash game. In the early millennium, there were tons of these crude little adventure games where you click around on screens and generally don't really have a lot of an idea of what to do. And this game was no different. Really, the only thing that stands out about it is this weird, out of place jump scare. Cover your eyes because things are about to get weird. In the second puzzle solving area, you'll explore this exhibit with a big sarcophagus in the center. Of course, you're gonna click on that. And how can you not? It's right there. It's waiting. Now, in these old trashy games, clicking on random objects basically was the gameplay. And if you click on the sarcophagus, prepare to be traumatized for life. A desiccated monster face covers the entire screen. If you've ever read one of those scary stories to tell in the dark books, it's kind of like getting attacked by one of those faces. Those things are messed up. This jump scare just goes way too hard for a kid game that only exists to promote a dumb movie. We were all suckered in, and this game quickly became the stuff of legend on playgrounds. We all had to see it for ourselves, and anyone who did probably regretted it. Now, next over at number 19, behind the sunny facade of Super Mario 64 is this uncanny quality we can't quite put our finger on. Peach's castle is a lonely place. The Toads can't keep us from getting an abandoned amusement park vibe here, and that feeling only gets stronger in Big Boo's haunt. Reaching this level has a weirdness factor. Jumping into a haunted dollhouse is the sort of thing that a mind poisoned on Goosebumps books would get spooked by. The ghosts aren't the danger here. The mansion itself is a spooky place, way spookier than similar mansions in games like Banjo-Kazooie. The mansion here is sparse and gray with this droning soundtrack that doesn't really imply kooky, lighthearted fun. It feels like death. And the discordant carnival room in the basement only makes the entire area that much worse. But the worst of it is in the parlor with the suspiciously detailed piano. Probably one of the biggest jump scares of our childhood. Get close to that piano and it springs to life. The lid opens to reveal rows of teeth and then it starts chasing you. Looking at the piano now, it isn't really that scary. It's just a silly little piano with triangles for teeth, but it feels like so much more when you're a kid. And while it's pretty goofy looking today, the jump scare was effective. There's nothing else even remotely like this in Mario 64. This thing just appears once, it can't be killed in any obvious way, and looks deadly in a way that no other enemy in the entire Mario canon really compares to. Nintendo can have a little bit of an evil streak, and this won't be the last Nintendo exclusive on this list. This thing is almost as scary as getting to the final trial in Super Mario Wonder and realizing you have to jump on balloons while invisible. No, we're still not getting over that. Anyway. Next over at number 18, Psychonauts. It's already a pretty spooky game. You know, you're exploring an abandoned mental asylum for a good part of it, but the spookiest moment comes very early while you're exploring an upbeat counselor's mind. In the game, you're sent to explore the mental worlds of different characters in like fun little platforming levels. And Milla is one of the most colorful. Her level is a dance party, and for the most part, it matches her outgoing personality. It's all happiness and dancing and disco music, but there's one secret room you're not meant to see. By hovering to one corner of her mind, you'll find a dimly lit orphanage room filled with scribbled sketches of children. Opening the memory vault in this room reveals that she used to work at an orphanage and that it burned down, all in stark black and white imagery. And there's more. So smacking open the chest reveals a darker corner of the mind. So of course you jump right in. And what do you get? Eternally burning children whispering in this locked chamber that's just way too hellish for a kid's game. The nightmares are trapped, so you're in no direct danger, but the room is so spooky we're still thinking about it. Next over at number 17, sometimes the creepiest places are just hiding right in plain sight. That's why simple premises like a critter living in your walls are so effective. Where you feel the most safe, you're not safe at all because a big ugly monster with weird hands wants to kidnap you forever. That's the kind of fear that we're getting from the bottom of the well in Ocarina of Time. And this isn't like the creepy Zelda game on Nintendo 64. The sequel, Majora's Mask, was just way creepier in general, but nothing compares to the first time you explore this well. So after draining it in Kakariko Village by getting the mill started again, you'll need to play a song to the organ grinder guy. That guy already freaked us out at kids because organ grinders sound like machines for grinding up your organs, and then there's a weird song and he looked weird, but I digress. Dropping down to the bottom of the well, you'll have to pass through some rooms that look like low-poly torture chambers, walk through some invisible walls, dodge enemies hanging from the ceiling, and fight flying glowing skulls. Yes, that's some good Halloween energy, but it's the enemy at the end that got us really good. A creature called Dead Hands guards the chest, and this thing hasn't really been topped. Now, everyone talks about how creepy the re-dead monsters are because they are. Those shambling things that live in the ruins of Hyrule give you like these weird hugs, they try and suck your life, they're uncanny, they're creepy. But Dead Hands is stranger. This thing grows out of the ground with weird white and red splotchy skin that it looks like they're smeared with blood or covered in gross legions. I don't know what's going on. It spawns these long gangly hands out of the ground to grab at Link, seemingly able to grow as many hands as it needs. It's supremely gross, like a really gross enemy for a game that's absolutely meant for kids. Someone at Nintendo is really creeped out by grabby hands, and they're messing with the rest of us. Master Hand, those weird hands in Tears of the Kingdom. Who knew counting to 10 could be so sinister? Next to number 16, when you're a kid, you don't really understand the limitations of video game consoles. You know, we didn't understand why games needed to be made with pixels, or couldn't have polygons, or why one console had better music than another, or why Sonic couldn't be on Super Nintendo and Mario couldn't be on Genesis. Whatever a game presented to us, we just accepted it. And when those games that we were so familiar with glitched out, it felt like a demon had possessed our console. And that's what the phenomenon of cartridge tilting had done to us. Maybe our old video games are like really haunted because if you wiggle certain games around after starting them up in a physical Super Nintendo, you could actually produce some pretty weird effects. We've experienced more than one strange startup with creepy music and creepier glitching graphics. And it's all because, like, you know, usually we just didn't put our cartridges in the slot properly, or we moved the console while playing it. Look, kids aren't smart. We weren't smart. We don't understand that you have to treat your video game consoles with some respect. We throw those things around, and sometimes that meant starting up Super Mario All-Stars with a spooky sound you wouldn't find anywhere else in the game. or watch Mortal Kombat devolve into a mess of pixels and stuttering noise. A lot of us just thought our old consoles were haunted. Next at number 15, 99% of your time playing Earthbound is just a quirky adventure with a group of friends as they work together to defeat this alien menace. Too bad this isn't your average alien menace. Earthbound is a very silly game. You know, you'll usually fight living piles of barf, cults that really like painting stuff blue, and hippies that want to rumble. It's like a nostalgic weird road trip. Sure, your characters have to battle cheesy starmen from outer space, but nobody's really in danger. We're all safe, right? Well, there are dark moments in Earthbound, but nothing like the alien at the center of the story. Gigas is encountered by our heroes after they shed their bodies and travel to the distant past to battle. He's waiting in a formless state, a strange red vapor that appears like an infinitely repeated screaming face. And your nemesis Pokey is waiting in a room that resembles trails of intestines and describes Gigas as an almighty idiot, a creature that doesn't even know what it's doing, incapable of rational thought and just lashing out to destroy the universe. Now, fighting Gigas is impossible. In the final battle, you can't actually harm it. It attacks in a way you can't comprehend. The attack literally announces you cannot grasp the true form of Gigas' attack. Whatever it does to you, it hurts a lot. All that is creepy, and that's the goal. Like, the designer of Earthbound, Shigesato Itoi, has stated in interviews that Gigas is actually based on vague memories of an erotic scene in the Japanese adult film The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty that he saw at a way too young age. And no, we're not going to show it too much on screen here. We don't want to get demonetized, but he barely remembers any actual details of the scene, but describes the feeling of seeing an atrocity so early in life. So Gigas is apparently based on like watching sexual assault and murder as a child and being so freaked out that he made this. So this is why Earthbound influenced an entire cottage industry of freaky indie games that are actually super creepy. You know, like Undertale, Lone Survivor, stuff like that. Wow. Next at number 14, that Earthbound entry got really intense, so let's back up and talk about something a whole lot easier to explain and something I love. Ghosts popping up and scaring you randomly, specifically in the original Metal Gear Solid. So there are these secret ghost photo locations scattered all over Shadow Moses Island. Looking at them now, they're mostly just silly photos of the developer that have been distorted, and they'll only appear if you use the camera and look at the right spot. And when you take a photo, the ghost will appear in a little jump scare. And they're basically scary for only one reason. When we were kids, we would take photos randomly because that's what you do. You use every feature and you replay games over and over again. And I happened to get one of those ghost photos. It could creep you out so much it would make you want to never pick up a camera in these games again. Going back now and looking at the ghosts, like, it's goofy. It doesn't really matter, but they still kind of creep us out. Next, over at number 13, while we're trying to avoid games with explicitly horrific stuff, there's no getting around the Butcher from Diablo. And when all you know about developer Blizzard is Warcraft 2, going into a game like Diablo as a stupid kid was a mind-expanding experience. Halloween atmosphere is already pretty strong in Diablo, with like the gentle guitar playing in the lonely starting village of Tristram, but once you enter the hellish underground beneath the town, you'll be fighting so many skeletons and zombies and other random spooky creatures. It's all totally doable for a little kid, nothing too scary, but then there's the Butcher. His lair is decorated with like the dismembered dead bodies of his victims, and beating him is the first real challenge you'll need to overcome in OG Diablo. This guy is living in so many people's heads. He's become a legend in the series, returning in much bigger forms in later games or spawning like a random serial killer that's unstoppable if you're not prepared for him in Diablo 4. For being such an intensely creepy dude, we had to put him somewhere. Diablo isn't really for kids, but we're putting him on the list anyway. We played it anyway, we turned out fine. If you're our age, you probably did too. But hey, we still don't like this guy.
The spirits of the dead are now avenged.
Next, over at number 12, while the Butcher is viscerally disgusting, there's a much scarier enemy in a game that's way more kid-friendly. Zombies Ate My Neighbors. It's an insanely difficult little top-down shooter from LucasArts, and it's one of our favorites for like the campy horror mashups. There are zombies and stuff, sure, but you're also gonna fight werewolves, killer dolls, mummies. There are so many weird enemies in the game, but the one that really fills us with the most fear was the chainsaw guy. Very early in the game, you're dumped directly into the chainsaw hedge maze, where you'll be running from an insane chainsaw maniac. This guy can cut through hedges to chase you down and can't be harmed with regular weapons. The only way to take him down is if you get a bazooka, but even that isn't good enough because there isn't just one maniac, there are many. And they're all blazing through this maze, cutting a path of destruction straight for all the citizens you're trying to save. The chainsaw hedge maze might be like one of our earliest experiences with survival horror. You know, you're stuck in this very difficult to navigate area with a stressful time limit, being chased by multiple enemies you can't kill with your gun or squirt gun. The sound of these guys' chainsaws revving up is just enough to permanently scar a young player. Now at number 11, Echo the Dolphin. It has no business being as creepy as it is. A game about respecting the ocean and playing as a dolphin starts with all your friends and family being violently abducted by this unknown force, then forcing your little lost underwater bud to explore the dark depths of the ocean. Look, swimming around in the dark is enough for us to say that this game is scary. Anyone that's afraid of deep water is gonna get heart palpitations playing this game. But the real weird stuff comes at the very end. You're doing more than swimming around in the water. You also you fight the alien queen. Yes, after getting sucked up into space, this happens, stick with me, you'll face off against like this screeching and scary form of the Vortex Queen. It has giant teeth, it makes awful noises, it's awful in every way. We hate the Vortex Queen. Other games are about scary monsters, so of course we expect to see something weird, but there's no preparing for the Vortex Queen. After hours of exploring with, regular undersea life and undersea vibes, you're not trained to face off against something this so weirdly detailed and alien. Now at number 10, you know I was going to bring up Max Payne, of course. Max Payne isn't just a noir-infused action game with slow-mo shooting, there are actually multiple nightmares and drug freakouts that really messed us up for good and bad reasons. So the game starts with Max Payne's entire family getting brutally gunned down. Sure, it's got some cheese, like Max himself yelling kind of like Darth Vader, "No!" style, but, it's still pretty effective for how quick it is. And expect to hear all that crying and screaming a lot more because the lengthy dream sequences later on are some of the most loathed in the game, notorious, for pretty good reasons. You have to navigate this creepy maze in one section or walk on narrow blood trails in the dark, making very difficult floaty jumps in another. Imagine being trapped in the maze as a young player, the creepy heartbeat soundtrack, and baby crying and mother screaming constantly in the background, all while trying to figure out how to do this weird maze or this weird jumping trick. These levels were an absolute mess, but they were very effective from a mental standpoint. Next, over at number 9, for games about a big pink ball of fluff, the Kirby series is weirdly packaged with nightmare fuel. The earliest games had like an eyeball boss that dripped blood. The latest game is about an Earth-like planet that's devoid of life with like a blob entity taking the form of your friends and chasing you. That empty world is pretty creepy, but it's not even the first crumbling world in the series. That goes to the Shiver Star world in Kirby 64, one of the earliest games in the series that a lot of people were exposed to. And the Shiver Star isn't exactly scary, not unless you've got an overactive imagination. So Shiver Star is a gray planet near the end of Kirby 64. It looks like a standard snow level with all the colorful trappings those might have in your average Mario game. There are igloos, sleds, and snowmen. But the further you go, the more wrong it feels. You enter large buildings that are totally devoid of human life, then enter this sprawling factory with creatures stuck in floating tubes. Machines still exist, and as you fight the robotic boss of the area, you'll see a vast, empty cityscape in the distance. Huge skyscrapers that are seemingly abandoned, with only machines remaining, and the planet just frozen over. It looks exactly like Earth. And the single moon circling the planet definitely adds more data points to that theory. No matter what, for a little kid, this gives strong lost at the mall feelings, and that's good enough to belong on this list. You're a young kid popping in your first Kirby game on your Nintendo 64, and you're presented with a post-apocalyptic frozen over hellscape. Good stuff. Now over at number 8, if video games taught us anything, it's to stay out of the water. Usually a dip in hip-deep liquids spells certain death for old-school video game protagonists. We've come a long way since water was just a fancier bottomless pit. You can swim in so many games now, but swimming has to be limited. That's why we have sharks in games. They're glorified hall monitors. Even early games in our video game lives instilled the fear of sharks. You didn't need to play Far Cry 3 to get eaten by sharks. Casual games like Banjo-Kazooie would grind you into chum and wet the waters with your entrails, believe it or not. In an early level of the adventure, the original Banjo-Kazooie, you'd encounter the diabolical Snacker the Shark. This guy has eyes for the bear and bird combo meal. The moment you dive into the water outside the starting level, the music changes and Snacker the Shark swims straight for you. This thing induced so many panic attacks in our tiny brains back then. It was so stressful. The music is gonna haunt our nightmares. It doesn't matter how cute and colorful everything is, Even Snacker the Shark is ridiculously adorable. Look at those eyes. He even has a silly voice like everything else. Today, this guy isn't even remotely scary, but when we were kids, when he was chasing us down with that music, nothing could be scarier. Next at number 7, here's another very, very simple scary thing that only freaks out big babies, but we think it's justified. You're running away from a big skeleton guy. You can't tell me big skeleton ghosts aren't scary, and everything in Donkey Kong Country 2 is a little bit spookier. The Haunted Hall level appears after the Haunted Pirate Ship world, and the Haunted Swamp world, and the Haunted Carnival world. Everything is haunted in this game, but very few levels feature actually honest-to-God ghosts. This one does, and he's a big boy. In the Haunted Hall, you're being chased by a big ghost, and he'll catch you when the timer runs out. You're riding on the skull coaster because, of course you are, it's a video game, and you'll need to jump to special barrels to add more time to your life. Hit the opposite, red barrels, and you'll slow down. So you're being chased and need to carefully hit barrels, or your ghost skeleton crocodile meat. don't hit all the barrels, only touch the right ones. It's a very stressful experience, but maybe that's why we're so good at running away from monsters in other games like Outlast now. We had experience before horror games invented those invincible stalkers, because this stuff was brutal. And now at number 6, the spookiest room in Castlevania Symphony of the Night is so simple and surprising. It's burned into our memories. It's a kind of weird detail that worms its way into our brain and doesn't let go. It's going the extra mile to really make us feel like anything can happen in Dracula's castle. So it's located in the royal chapel area of the castle. There's this small, mysterious room with 2 seats and a booth. This is the confession room, and people are still talking about it. This quiet room serves no purpose in the game. There are no enemies to fight, there are no items to find or upgrades to collect. It's a weird room. That's it. Different events will randomly occur here. If you sit on the left side, a ghostly priest will appear and bless you.
Rest your weary soul here. May the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost be with you. Amen.
If you sit on the right side, you can hear the confession of a crying ghost shown in these blistering pixel physics. Look, for being such tiny sprites, the animation really does get across what's going on here in a very artistic way. It's impressive. If you sit for a confession and you're unlucky, a possessed priest might appear and spear you straight through the booth. That sudden spear attack surprise got us good. Dracula's castle still feels haunted. It's awesome. It's hiding secrets we may never fully see. Now at number 5, Super Metroid is a perfect starter game for every young player. It's a game that makes you feel lonely and isolated without hitting you with any overt, over-the-top horror. Some of the locations, like the abandoned ghost ship, are pretty strange, or that melting skeleton, or the ending with Mother Brain transforming and becoming impossible to beat after Samus ran through this creepy corridor, like the bodies of aliens. You know, Super Metroid has a lot of spooky stuff going on, but it all starts with the opening menu. That droning, mysterious music with a stark image of dead scientists surrounding a sealed Metroid alien. You never actually got to see dead people in a Super Nintendo game, much less ones with hints of actual blood. And actually exploring the starting area is spooky too, like walking the lonely corridors, passing dead bodies, all before a giant alien with wings busts in and attacks. It's a slow build to a big explosive conclusion that prepared us for an entire game of solo exploration. Those little pixelated bodies really did a number on us. Who knew Nintendo had a bloodlust? In those days, with the Super Nintendo, we didn't really know that the creators of Mario could go creepy and atmospheric, and it just took us by surprise. Now at number 4, there's nothing cooler than video games and dinosaurs. So when Jurassic Park hit Super Nintendo, of course, we had to rent it, but we didn't know the horrors inside. You know, games like Doom were scary, but in a way that we were all prepared for. The levels were colorful with monstrous enemies that weren't super dangerous, and you were a badass. You had a shotgun. Go nuts on them. But when you're playing as a much less impressive protagonist in a much blurrier, weirder game, suddenly the scary ratio gets way worse. Jurassic Park is like a top-down shooter set in the park from the movie You're trying to escape and there's just hordes of hungry dinosaurs coming at you. That's all normal. The trauma comes in when you have to enter the interior mini dungeons and then the perspective shifts. So instead of playing a kid-friendly top-down little pea shooter like Zelda, you're looking down the barrel of a gun and exploring lo-fi hallways filled with raptors. Those things are basically aliens for kids that grew up in the 90s. It's somehow worse that the rest of the game isn't set in these underground areas. You're forced to leave the bright and colorful overworld to enter this survival horror steam tunnels filled with monsters that are going to rip your face off. It was just so jarring. Now at number 3, Metal Gear Solid 2 gets very weird very quickly in its last act. It's unsettling. So after infiltrating the underwater arsenal gear, everything starts to go wrong for our protagonist, Raiden. This is before he got himself the cool robot body. At this point in the story, he's anything but sure of himself. He's falling down a hole of insane plot mechanics that left us as confused as him.
Raiden, you won't be able to hang, throw, or chokehold anyone in your current state.
Why not?
Is it really necessary to ask? It's just not a good idea to perform those maneuvers. There could be complications.
Oh, really, Jack? Do we have to spell it out for you? Really?
So, when sneaking around Arsenal gear, your trusted ally, Colonel Campbell, calls Raiden and tells him to turn off the game console.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now.
What's wrong with you?
Don't worry, it's a game. It's a game just like usual.
You'll ruin your eyes playing so close to the TV.
What are you talking about?
And then that's just the start. It turns out the Colonel isn't the Colonel at all. He's a computer simulation that's actually rapidly falling apart.
Your role, that is mission, is to infiltrate the structure and disarm the terrorists.
My role? Why do you keep saying that?
Why not? This is a type of role-playing game. The point is that you play out your part, and I expect you to turn in a perfect performance.
Colonel, I just remembered something.
What?
That I've never met you in person. Not once.
Complete your mission, according to the simulation.
Everything so far has been a play to turn Raiden into the ultimate soldier, kind of like a ridiculously elaborate training exercise. And the evil AI that's been secretly pulling the strings goes on a long, weird ramble. The image of Colonel starts to break down, showing his skeleton under his skin as his voice becomes more and more distorted. It is so creepy. This is an extremely weird twist that only gets weirder with age. Whether you love the weirdness or hate it, the game was definitely going for something, and it absolutely left us speechless by the end. We're still saying the quote, "I need scissors 61" to this day.
I hear it's amazing when the famous purple stuffed worm in Flapjaw Space with the tuning fork does a raw blink on Harry Carey Rock. I need scissors 61.
Now down at number 2, if Metal Gear Solid 2 is too cerebrally weird for you, here's one of the most basic traumatic moments in video games that definitely got us all. In the early Sonic games, exploring in a bubble underwater comes with a time limit. Our normally fast little hedgehog friend moves like molasses in the water, and the game reminds you how much time you have with the iconic drowning music stinger. The beat rapidly speeds up as you get closer and closer to drowning, and today it's genuinely stressful because you feel like you don't have enough time, and it is absolutely anxiety inducing. The drowning music starts much earlier than we would usually expect and it lasts a little too long. You'll be desperately jumping for bubbles with extra air before sinking into the briny deep permanently. Your palms will be sweating, your eyes will be twitching. That music triggers a fear in all of it. Look, you don't want to drown. Like that iconic Jaws theme for sharks and how it builds. The tune of Sonic drowning might as well be the official soundtrack of drowning. When you're a child, it's the most panic-inducing sound in the world. Now, number one, we're ending with a different type of dread with another Sonic game. Drowning is a primal fear. This strange secret here brings out a more existential dread, a confusion at the universe itself. In Sonic CD, there are like hidden messages to discover in the sound test developer feature. By accessing the secret sound test menu and then setting the 3 numbers to certain combos, we'll get developer messages and other extremely weird stuff. And that's where our nightmare fuel comes from. There are cute images of Tails and Sonic, a goofy Batman homage with a buff dark Sonic standing stoically on a cloudy night. You know, if you're like us and you kept searching for secrets, you'd also find the weirdest image in the game. We all search for stuff like this as kids on the internet, and most of the time, stories like this were lies, but this one is very real. Put in the right combination of numbers here, and you'll get an off-model image of Sonic with untranslated Japanese text while weird music plays. And for us, like looking back now, it isn't even a little scary. How could it be? This developer is putting a weird message in their game. This game isn't haunted, nothing strange here, but kids are dumb. We wanted it to be scary. This image alone had to spawn an entire genre of creepy stories we all passed around about possessed game cartridges sold at garage sales. Images like this twisted the Sonic fandom forever. It made us want to believe something was wrong with our games. Mundane explanations are no fun, and the translated text is signed Majin, which some people think means Satan. Basically, it's like the devil signed their autograph. That's bad news. But no, Majin is a nickname for a worker at Sega, and the music is wrong. A much peppier, upbeat track plays over the Japanese version of The Room. An error swapped out the tracks, so the North American version got a way creepier version just by complete accident. Taking out the music and the world message, the image of Sonic's detailed face is more funny than frightening. Maybe we just had a lot of time on our hands as kids to be scared skilly, thinking of stuff just from inconsequential stuff. Now as adults, the only thing we have to dread more are like bills, taxes, and Sonic games from Sega that we just have to sit around and really hope end up being good. And that's all the stuff that freaked out a lot of our collective childhoods. There are so many more weird and spooky and traumatizing moments in games we missed, so let us know what games scared you the most as a kid. The less scary they actually are, the better. Like, I want to hear about the Goombas in Super Mario giving someone nightmares. It's the inconsequential stuff that gets us the most. That's really the point of this list. So let us know anything you think, but if you like this video, clicking the like button helps us out. We appreciate it. We put out videos every single day. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.